Welcome to Three Tiny Questions. Three Tiny Questions with Andy Goldberg, CMO of the New York Mets. Let's go Mets!
Hey, welcome to Three Tiny Questions, where we ask the leading minds in marketing one question each about brands, trends, culture, whatever else comes to mind, so the rest of us in advertising and marketing can get a tiny bit better at it. I'm Mike Rovner, partner at Tiny, an ad agency devoted to making great work with great people and having a great time doing it. And with me, as always, are my partners, Tom Chrisman and Michael Stoopack. I'm not sure where I'm pointing, actually, but you guys. Say hi, guys.
Waved.
Hello.
Hello.
On today's episode of Three Tiny Questions, we're pleased to be joined by Andy Goldberg. Andy's a longtime friend of ours back in our days at Margiotis Fertitta and Partners. He went on to roles at BBH and Wieden & Kennedy, where he worked on amazing brands like Brand Jordan, Nike, and Levi's, and then did some truly incredible things in his roles at GE and Amex. And now, Andy has everyone's dream job. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of your New York Mets. Welcome, Andy.
Wait, I thought the Yankees, isn't that the Yankees everybody's dream job? No offense, Andy. I know you're a
Taken.
big
Untaken. What do you want me to tell you about my story?
Yeah,
tell us your
your
story.
background, your journey, marketing.
Well, I learned everything I needed to know about advertising from a guy named Michael Stoopack.
Heard of him.
So first, when I started in the industry, Michael was my boss, right? We worked on dishwashing detergent together. We worked on NFL Sunday Ticket together. Rovner was the creative. It was great. Learned a ton at a small agency. I would tell anyone getting into the industry, start at a small agency. You learn nothing at a big agency other than to push paper and do status reports. At a small agency, you actually have to be in it from top to bottom, which was invaluable. But then you go to a bigger agency like a BBH and you start to learn more discipline in how things are executed at bigger companies. Worked with Unilever, worked on Pepsi, worked on Levi's. And there's a lot more structure and discipline that goes into that. And I think that's important for anyone to learn. And I learned a ton there and loved it. And also started to travel the world, which is fantastic. And then as Mike said, I went on to Wieden & Kennedy. And I would tell you that was the dream job, to run Brand Jordan and work on Nike. And it was just cool as hell. And then I would tell everyone, don't do that. Don't do your dream job when you think it's your dream job, because one of the challenges was I thought I knew everything. It was sneakers and Nike and fun and who cares, and there's nothing to learn. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to constantly be learning what I'm working on. And I'm not gonna say it is easy. It was hard, but it wasn't as much of a challenge as I had hoped. And then I'm gonna say I fell into GE. I fell into GE as the head of I forgot my first title, but I ended up being the chief creative officer there. And it was 8 years of every day learning something new. I didn't know how a gas turbine worked. I didn't know how a jet engine worked, but I learned. And it was some of the best work I've ever done in my career. It was always inventing new ways. It was sort of the mantra of the company of imagination at work. That's what we did with the work.
And you were working with BBDO at the time?
I was working with BBDO at the time.
You had who was it? Greg Hahn and
Greg Hahn and David Lubars.
Lubars, yeah.
It was an 8.5-year run, and it was spectacular. But GE had pivoted. It started to go the path that it is now. And there's only so many ways, and from a creative standpoint, an agency standpoint, that the brief can come in saying, we need another ad about gas turbines. We need another ad. We need another campaign about jet engines, because it takes 20 years to develop a jet engine. It's not like a new product coming out all the time. It's like, it's only so many ways to skin this cat and tell this story. Yeah. So it kind of got old and you were coming up with things and doing fun things, but it ran its course. Yeah. And I started looking for my next gig, and I went to Amex, and that was always like another dream job, in that I admired the company. I admired the work. I had actually interviewed there years before. It was interesting going to Amex. It was so process driven. It's so data driven. It was long times to develop anything, over research. Like GE was like, if we liked it, we ran it. We ran it by the CEO and we did it. This was tests, focus group, research. It was good to learn. And I actually loved being at Amex. The people are great. I also went from a team where GE, the marketing team was 20 people max. My team at Amex when I was started was 70. When I was leaving, I was building an internal agency of another 250.
You were a marketer at an innovation company before at GE,
Yep.
and here you were a marketer at a marketing company. Just
That's
it's
exactly right.
all American Express is.
That's all it is. It is, and it's a beast, and it's an awesome beast. And I still love the company, and I love the people there, and they did some great work. And frankly,
Member since 1990.
See, that's a long time, by the way. You know what that just says? That just says you're old. Anyway,
that's why.
So I go to Amex, and frankly, I was there for 10 months, and then COVID hit, and then I'm home, and I'm home for 2 years.
Wow.
And I got a call from CAA, and they said, "Do you know anyone who'd be interested in being the CMO of the New York Mets?" And I said, "Well, me." And my next call was with Sandy Alderson, who, for those of you who are baseball fans, know he's like a legend in baseball.
Love it.
The GM of the A's. And then I had a interview with Steve Cohen, and
also a legend.
Different legend, but still a legend. And I got offered the job, and I started at the Mets at the beginning of March of 2022, and we had a great season in 2022, and that's the reason. It's all because of me. And
you inspired the players.
No doubt.
So I think we're treading into some answers of questions. And
So we should.
Not that we can't cut this up and whatnot, but let's.
We will. We'll do 3TQ BTS.
Well, I think
3TQ BTS.
Well, I do think that we're going to cut, and this a little inside baseball for you. You like what I did there? You see how I did it?
I love. By the way, that was very good. It's like you're a creative.
Just slipped it in. A little sinker. I think what we'll end up doing is cutting a nice breezy 3 tiny questions. That is the video version of this, maybe, and then do the full podcast where we get Andy's full story. Because
I love it. Andy's full story. It's only for subscribers.
It's time for question 1.
You're the CMO of the New York Mets. You have the unique challenge of engaging a diverse and passionate fan base in one of the world's most technologically advanced sports markets here in New York City, the center of the world. Could you share your insights on how the Mets balance traditional elements of sports marketing with the need to stay in a rapidly changing digital world?
I'd be happy. It's a great question, by the way.
Thank you.
And there's many parts to it. I'd break it down first in audience. You have your core Met fans, your core fans in general, who, you can have direct relationships with. We use email, SMS. I have their information. They want to share. There's a sharing society there of, I'm going to give you something, you're going to give me something. It's somewhat traditional in its mindset, but it actually works really well to keep a relationship going. Then there's the younger fan base that I'm trying to attract. We lean heavily on TikTok and Instagram to engage them, and not in your traditional manners. So Wallpaper Wednesday has become a big thing. We do that with all our players. We create unique looks and feels. We put that out there. We do a lot of TikTok, not related to baseball, but related to what the players are doing in their life. And part of the reason for that is the NBA and the NFL have done a really good job, the NBA especially, in finding ways to bring these heroes, these superstars off the court and talk about their sneakers, their food, and all the things they do. Baseball's behind in that. We're trying to bring that forth. So that's a real key way to engage a younger audience and market them, and then eventually sell them. The older audience, it's more traditional channels. The Met fan who might not come to the game is watching SNY. I run tons of ads on SNY. I mean, my inventory on SNY is out the wazoo, but I run a lot of ads that are all about the experience at the ballpark, not necessarily what you would expect in the traditional way of doing is showing Francisco Lindor or Pete Alonso hitting a home run. Like, that's expected. My entire effort, it was started last year, it's going to move forward this year, is everything you can do at the ballpark and the experience. So the campaign is actually titled Baseball Hits Different Here. And it's about the way the players interact with the fans and are regular people and aren't just these superheroes on the field. all those things are important to different fan bases. So we go after different targets, and then we use different mediums to hit them. So SNY is an easy one. We use our radio partner with Odyssey all the time. But then we really lean heavily on social. One thing that always shocks people, and I had it actually earlier today, I have a meeting once every 2 weeks with my counterparts at the other NL East teams. And we talk about what we do and how we can do stuff better together. On the business side of sports, because I'm restricted to my home territory, I'm not in competition with those guys. We want all boats to rise. On the baseball side, there's no picking up the phone. But that's one of the key ways we learn and how we do better. It's how we learn how to, I'll do it with other New York teams. I'll talk to them. I've been talking to the Jets. How did they create One Jets Drive? I want to create content like that to appeal to a broader audience, because baseball is an older sport, and I'm fighting for your entertainment dollar. I'm fighting for your Broadway show, your dinner and a movie. It's a very different mentality than just your baseball fan. And then, Tom, back to your question, that's how you hit these other audiences. And the most important thing in baseball right now is growing a new set of fans. And not letting it fall apart with the older fan. And we are, like, the Mets are one of the hottest teams with a younger teenage audience, and we need to continue to build that up.
It's time for question 2.
All right, so that's obvious that the New York Mets are not only just well known, but they're pretty much beloved internationally. I mean, if you're a fan, you're a fan, doesn't matter where you are. Balancing the marketing needs of, a single season or even a game, because you said the stories change every day, and at the end of the day, we're storytellers. So you've got that story to tell, you've got your season story to tell, you've got the longer term plan for the team itself. But really what I'm interested in is, what are the plans, or how do you balance, rather, all of that storytelling from the game to the season, to the team, to then the brand that exists outside of Citi Field?
Yeah. So probably the hardest part of my job, frankly, because that first part, that immediate need, is what drives ticket sales and revenue. So it's like, get people to the ballpark, have people buy tickets, have people know the urgency of, oh my God, if I'm not there right now, I'm missing this. Luckily, the Mets and a lot of sports teams, but specifically the Mets, so many other outlets carry the narrative of the season, whether it's SNY, WFAN, and our radio partners, ESPN, just the hundreds of podcasts and social media accounts that exist just to talk about the Mets. The narrative there's not much I can control. So you sort of let that flow. And my focus is figure out, how do I get people to engage and want to be in the ballpark or part of what's happening tomorrow in the immediate. And then the bigger challenge is that long term. It is building this idea that it's not necessarily following us from a day-to-day aspect. And I think, Mike, this is what you're getting at. It's about understanding that the Mets exist, and the Mets are a brand you want to be associated with because they represent this other thing in New York.
Yeah.
And this other thing in New York is, if other brands in New York, and I'll use other teams. So the Giants are the Giants, tradition, football, classic. The Jets are, I'm a diehard Jet fan. I say this with my love. I love the Jets. The Jets are just misfits, but they're trying so hard. And I'm telling you, next year, Aaron Rodgers, we are fucking going to the promised land. And then you look at the Knicks, are as bad as they've been. People stick with them. They sell out every night. They're playing great now, but they are the heart of New York. In a sense, New York is a one basketball team, even though the Nets exist. They are truly have an advantage. And New York is a big time basketball town. Hockey, I know a lot of people don't love hockey, but I'm a diehard Ranger fan. I will tell you that is its own niche. When you get, and each team represents a little bit of a different thing. When you get to baseball, and I truly believe this, that at New York's core, New York is a baseball town, first and foremost. And the Yankees represent historic tradition. They actually don't represent New York as much as they represent baseball writ large as this whole. The Mets represent more of what New York is. The Mets are this gritty, scrappy, sometimes beaten up, but will always rise above team. And I want people around the world to associate New York and the Mets together, because I think there is more of a symbiotic relationship there than there is with other teams. And that's what we're going for, and it's hard.
It's time for question 3. Whee-hee!
I want to take this conversation and the themes of a lot of this conversation to a place for the folks working on the agency side with marketers like yourself, because for most marketers and agencies, their relationships are based on the kind of like forecasts and forecastable plans that get set predictably, like you talked about for Amex and for GE. And this past season certainly was anything but for the Mets in terms of baseball results, changes to the roster, how things were going. How do agencies be better partners to clients who are impacted by that kind of change, that significant level of change?
As a client who's been on the agency side, and I would tell any client, if you haven't sat across the table, don't become a client. If you don't understand what it's like to sit on that side of the table, you actually can't operate well with an agency to understand, in my mind, it is a partnership. I might have a brief, you'll work on something, and then, 3 weeks later, we're working on it together. Guys, I have a change in my business strategy. We got to pivot. And the last thing I want from an agency is to go, well, that's 75 more hours, and we don't have that. And like, okay, are you my partner in this? Are we growing this together or not? And I will give a lot of kudos to BBDO in that fact and McGarry Bowen. Like, yes, at GE and Amex, I was able to pay those agencies a ton of money.
Sure.
But there
were hours.
Yeah, there was never reconciliation. There was never a discussion. It was just, we are your partner. How are we going to help you? And I treated them the same way. So that's the first part. The second part is understand your client's business and problem. Go walk the halls of your client. Stoopack, I'll go back to like when we were working together, like we walked the offices of Unilever and Ben Kieser to understand we went up to the NFL and said, okay, we know what our assignment is, but what else are you working on? And not because we want more of assignment, because we want to understand the business writ large. Some reason that has disappeared from the equation more recently, and it's become more transactional. I think that's what you were getting at. And we got to get back to
Is that the pandemic? Do you think that's the pandemic that did that? Is that one of the last vestiges?
I think it is a little bit of the pandemic. Look, I had a little bit before. Part of it is culture. Part of it is who's working on each side of the table. But I do think the pandemic led to it. I also think that a new crop of talent have come through, whether it's on the agency side or on the client side, and just go, I have my agenda, my purpose, my work. I'm going to do what I want. Instead of me scrambling to come up with how am I briefing you, I would so much rather see an agency go, okay, now I want to sit down and understand every aspect of your business and how we can help problem solve through creative and through marketing versus waiting for me to give you a brief on something that I thought of that might be important or it might not, because most of the time, and I've always, external thinking is going to unwrap something that you hadn't thought about internally.
Preach. Hey man, that's amazing. And there's no way we're going to cut this thing into a breezy 5 minutes.
I
and
know,
I don't care.
Sorry, I talk a lot. You know that.
No.
This has been 3 Tiny Questions with the absolutely fabulous you, Andy Goldberg of the New York Mets. A tremendous tiny thanks to you, sir. That was my Stoopack impression.
Well done.
Well done.
We're your hosts, the tiny team of Michael Stoopack, Mike Rovner, and Tom Chrisman.
And you can check out our agency at tinyagency.com and see us provoking big ideas and belly laughs all over your LinkedIn feeds. Hey, tune in next time for more 3 Tiny Questions and send us your biggest marketing questions right here in our feed. And maybe you'll find yourself featured on 3 Tiny Questions.
Or maybe you'll come to London with us when we take Dave Kingman to meet the King Charles, which is our idea that we're giving Andy for free right now.
I'll send it in, boys. Stay tiny.
Stay tiny, everyone.
Stay tiny.